One area of creativity that gets overlooked is teaching. Whether one teaches the hard sciences or in the humanities or in the professions, creativity, which I'm going to think of as solving the problem of attaining and keeping attention of the students and engaging them in their learning, is one of the main tasks of being a professor. Although for a college instructor, there's an even greater burden to know the material and cover the material. And I'm putting the cover the material in air quotes, as they say. As a friend says, it's better to uncover it rather than to cover it. In all those cases, creativity in presentation is key. So I decided I wanted to talk to some professors about how they do that. And I asked the English professors at Dalton State College if they would like to talk to me about a favorite book and how it informs their teaching and how they might teach it. My first taker, and I wasn't surprised, was Dr. Jennifer Randall, who is professor of English. She is also currently the president of the Faculty Senate, and I could list a number of other accomplishments and achievements that she has done in her duties at the college. So join me as we talk about her choice, Plato's Republic. Hello, Dr. Randall.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, although a little sinusy. I think it's the weather, the cold and hot.
Yes, it's February.
Yes.
And I'm outside today because it's warm and nice, but who knows what it'll be tomorrow. Probably cold rain. So yeah, anyway.
Georgia.
I'd like to start with some information about you. Where do you consider your hometown?
Well, I was born in Davenport, Iowa.
I've been there.
Yes, my parents went to the Palmer College of Chiropractic, and that's actually where they met. So they both decided to become chiropractors, and they met their very first semester there, and about a year later, they got married and had me. So I came along when they were finishing up their degree, and my dad found an opening in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So he opened a business there. He took over from the chiropractor that was there. And so we lived in Orangeburg for a couple years. And then we moved to Columbia, South Carolina, and Lexington, those areas.
Yes.
So South Carolina is where I consider home. But it's funny because I don't really sound Southern as much. It's because my dad's from Colorado and my mom's from Chicago. So I have kind of a mixture of accents and I don't know, the way I say things.
Yeah. I knew that you had gone to grad school in South Carolina, but I never thought of you as having an accent or, speaking that way. So
honestly, when I came to Dalton State in 2011, my very first class, a student was like, "Are you British?" I was like, "No."
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. My husband's from the upstate in South Carolina, so I've spent a lot of time there over the years.
Yeah.
Know it well. So they're Spartanburg, Greenville types.
Yes.
And everything. And I actually, Davenport, Iowa, I have an interesting story about Davenport, Iowa, and running into somebody from 1,000 miles away there one night out of the blue that I knew. So it was just a crazy story. So when I hear Davenport, Iowa, which I know is on the river, I just think of meeting somebody from, who lived 1,000 miles away, and just it seemed like a total just chance thing, but it was not. So it was just it was Providence.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. It was amazing. Okay, and you have 4 children?
Yes, ma'am.
And they're all young.
Yes, my oldest is 12. She's in 6th grade now. And my youngest is 4.5. So she's in pre-K. They keep me busy.
So you are extremely busy with your functions at the college and being a mom and a wife and just all that. And then there's the daily stuff of doing the laundry,
Oh my gosh, yes.
which can take up a lot of time. I've been reading a lot about AI and how it's supposedly, I won't get into this here, but since we're talking about something from 2,500 years ago, but how it's supposed to save time and all these things, and people are going to lose their jobs. I was reading something about it today. And I thought, well, if they could train AI to empty the dishwasher
That's right.
and fold the clothes out of the dryer. That would, maybe that would save me some time. I don't know. And walk my dog, because I spend an awful lot of time walking my dog. He's a big dog, so he needs to be walked a lot. Yeah, so you are a busy lady, and I really appreciate that you are talking to me today about a book that really means a lot to you. And just to clarify, where did you go to college and grad school?
So I went to Converse in Spartanburg, because you mentioned Spartanburg, and it's now university. When I went, it was Converse College, and it was all girls, which, I had some misgivings about going to an all girls school, but it was a lot of fun. And I did exactly what people would picture. I rolled out of bed without any care for my appearance and just toddled into the classroom in my pajamas, which, happens anyway, I think. But especially at a all-girls school, I was just more free to not even worry. But yeah, it was a great experience. And then I went to Western Carolina and Cullowhee, North Carolina for my master's. So I got my bachelor's in English and then my master's in rhetoric and a focus on professional writing.
Right.
And then I got my PhD from Georgia State University, which is actually what brought us to Georgia. So,
okay.
And I got my PhD in rhetoric and composition and also British literature, because I liked both. And then I also did some writing, creative professional writing. So I just like it all. I try to cram as much as I could.
I did not realize that you, for some reason, I thought you'd gone to South Carolina, University of South Carolina. Okay. Now, into the questions. I have to be frank. When you emailed me back and said Plato's Republic was your choice, I was somewhat surprised. I expected the English faculty to pick a novel, really. The only other person so far who's responded picked a novel. So, but this will lead us to some great discussion. I knew of the book and its basic content, had read some of it, but preparing for this meeting, I had to read a significant portion of it. And I was pleasantly surprised how readable the translation was and how I could engage with it. So I want to start with, why did you choose this 25-year-old dialogue on how a city or government should be designed?
Yes, that's a great question. I asked myself why I chose Plato too. But when I saw your email, I was like, Plato. And it's simply because I feel like he created so much of our intellectual foundation in the Western world. Our philosophy, whether you agree with Plato or not, and I do both. I agree and disagree with him. He's just shaped so much of our ideas on society, on politics, philosophy, even education, the way that he talks about knowledge and ethics. You can even see, just practical concerns about old age and even dying in his work. So I just find it very human. Even though he's trying to build this great treatise, I also find it very flawed, and seeing him be very human kind of makes the work stand out. And just no matter what philosopher and idea I read, I always kind of go back to Plato, because he was one of the first philosophers that I actually read. And I kind of measure every other philosopher against him, for better or worse. But yeah, he's so foundational to, a lot of what we do in our educational field, especially liberal arts. So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. And I would say the same. I think that when it comes to him and Aristotle, and I tend to be more Aristotelian in my viewpoint, but about things, but you have to read both of them, and they were, Plato was his teacher, so they were nested up there, which is amazing when you think about it. And Socrates was Plato's teacher. Yeah. We may not agree with their answers, but they were asking the right questions. And they were the first people that asked the right questions and put it in a written form, so to speak.
And I really like how, like you said, the teacher, like at first when you have a teacher, you're just kind of like, oh man, they're right. This is so interesting. And then the further you kind of get and the more you experience life, you add on your own ideas and perspectives. And I see that happening with the three of them, which is so fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for my students too. At first be like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And then they kind of like grab a hold of the idea I share. But then the more they have with their experiences and their own like just life lessons, they kind of tailor what I gave them to their own purposes.
Yeah. And we'll get into this a little bit more in his methodology. But when did you first read it or were introduced to it?
At Converse College, I was a freshman. And so I, yeah, I thought about majoring in political philosophy, actually, or, politics or philosophy. But when I actually took a political science class and we had to focus on like the Middle East, I remember that was my first big politics class. I said, never mind. I don't want to major in politics. I just really like the philosophical aspect of, politics, which, makes sense when you think about the foundation for our society and how we think about the self. But yeah, so I'll never forget, it was Dr. Pavordi. He's recently retired, but he was quite a character at Converse College. He would dance in the classroom and he was just incredibly intelligent. So any philosophy class he taught, I took. And this was one of the ones. And the first thing I read was Plato. And it was so nice to kind of have that space. Because, you kind of think these ideas in your head, like, is that fair? Is this just? Like, what is goodness? And I feel like, there's a lot that you can read throughout your life, but philosophers kind of give you a voice for some of that, whether you are able to kind of check in with yourself and realize how you feel, and then you see it in writing, you're like, oh, this makes sense. But yeah, so I was really excited to read Plato, and then I just read a bunch of philosophers from, after him. So.
Okay. Yeah, I mentioned that, I would think most people wouldn't read it until maybe a junior level philosophy course, but you were introduced to it as a freshman. And I appreciate that at that time they were saying, okay, you get to be challenged. That's what college is about. You get to read this that you wouldn't necessarily pick up yourself, but that's what an education is. So exactly. That's good. Yeah. Because I didn't read Plato till I was in grad school. So. And it was more his rhetorical works as opposed to his political work. Okay. So Plato wrote this book, as he did others, as dialogues between Socrates and other citizens of Athens. And we tend to see Socrates in there. I lose track of everybody else's names because they're confusing Greek names. But so why do you think he chose Socrates and is Socrates a stand-in for himself in these books? Because he does a lot.
Yes, I think it's a little bit of both. Like he is a stand-in, but also kind of not. So Socrates was kind of viewed as a martyr, like he died for his philosophical perspectives. So I think Plato like centered his discussion with Socrates to show that philosophy matters. It's really important, and it's so important that you just like people will say, live and die for your beliefs. And that's what he thought. One of the big ideas in life is you have this thought, and if you think that it's true and good, then you hold it tight, and you'll, like all your passions will follow that same focus and drive. But yeah, so he's kind of historically accurate too. Like with Socrates, he did the Socratic method, that dialectic, the question and answering. So you see that for sure throughout the book, which to our modern eyes, it kind of makes me cringe because I feel like it's almost like too safe of it's too like cryptic sometimes. I'm like, oh, well, he's just using that for his effect. And I don't like get the full, I don't think it's quite as meaningful for me as it was for them, although I definitely appreciate the back and forth. But yeah, and Plato also kind of had that dramatic flair. Like he was trying to demonstrate how to search for the truth while he's talking about it. And he really did think, just like Socrates, that with, unless you question your ideas and you keep going back and forth with someone, that you won't really grow. You won't really fully understand what you think. Which makes a lot of sense in education, because that's one of the tenets of education, getting people, kind of prodding them a little bit, getting them to think, do I really believe this? Why do I believe it? Is it a fact? Is it an opinion? But yeah, so I think Plato was true a lot to Socrates' perspectives. he kind of put a lot of his ideas, though, into Socrates' mouth.
Right, yeah.
So it's kind of a blend of both of them. Uh, but I do really like how Plato shows philosophy in action, and it kind of shows the importance of that relationship. Like, it's not just thinking your thoughts, it's like putting those into action and actually like connecting with people, which is something I find really refreshing when I read him.
Yeah, I think that's a neat way of thinking about it. I hadn't looked at it that way. I think sometimes when you're reading it, you do get this sense of he's asking leading questions,
Yeah.
to get to a certain point, as opposed to really letting them just. I mean, they never ask the questions, so he's always the one, and that's his method. I mean, that's why he's writing the book, and he's trying to make a point, but he's trying to get there through a different method than just stating it outright like Aristotle would or most others would. So, yeah, and I always thought, he was a young man when Socrates was executed, so he probably, had some he didn't really like democracy and the Athenian way of doing things that much, so he probably had some issues about the way they did things. And so we talked about his method of dialectic, which is a way of finding truth. But I like how you point out that it was finding truth with other people, and that Socrates and Plato were more interested in the people thinking for themselves than just following, being followers of him in a sense. So Plato wrote this 2,400 years or more ago. When he uses the word republic, how are we supposed to understand that word?
Yeah, and I think, at first glance, it looks like he's talking about perhaps the more modern definition of republic, like not having a monarchy, power comes from the people, the rule of law, there's a constitution. But Plato was really kind of using broad strokes to say this, like if we want to understand ourselves, look outside of ourselves and see how things are structured, because sometimes it's hard to understand who you are and what you want. And looking around you and like conversing with people helps you understand yourself more. And then once you understand yourself, then you can kind of mirror that more in society. So like when you improve, society improves because it's all interconnected, which is really interesting. So his idea, it's kind of like instead of the politeia, however you say it, which has been one of the translations or one of the ways that republic or his idea has been translated. That's more kind of like just looking at the public, like how the public mirrors the self, how the self can be mirrored in other people's lives. So, it's not necessarily like the structure of governments, not like how the USA is structured and other places like France and stuff, but he's kind of looking more at like how society can best be structured for the good of everyone. Politics, the city, but he also is really focused on character, which I find to be fascinating for sure. And, like one of the things that I would disagree with Plato on is he doesn't think that citizens should vote. He doesn't think that they should like elect officials. He doesn't really see the idea of political equality as something that would be beneficial. And of course, here in America, we're just like,
Yeah.
everyone deserves a voice. But he really believed that the people who had the authority should be the wisest, and they should be the people that didn't want the spotlight, because those are the ones that will do the best job. And, kind of historically, that's not how it's been. Like, he kind of suggests that the people that want the power should be the people that do not get the power because they care more about, and he uses the word appetites. They care more about their desires than they do about the good of all. So,
right. Oh, wow. That's, in the beginning, I would say when we look back, at least in our understanding or maybe our idealization of it, we look back at the founding to people like George Washington and some of the others, you see a little bit more of that idea that they don't, Washington could have been far more powerful if he'd have wanted to be, but he quit after 8 years and, like this is the way it's going to be. I've served my country. That's what it's about. He wasn't hungry for power for its own sake. And you definitely see that over the 250 years of the country. You see a change in that, definitely, especially in the 20th century, to my understanding of political history. So that's, I really appreciate you saying that because, yes, Plato is very concerned with morality and ideals and ethics. And so that being the case, can you just kind of walk us through the high points of the outline of the book and his major arguments, if that's possible?
Sure. Yeah, I would love to. There are just a couple of points that I would like to focus on. So the first one that I always draw, whenever I mention this to students, I draw their attention. So this is book 1, and it's line 327C, and he's just begun. So this is like the second page. He says, he's talking to Glycon, and he's like, can you really persuade if we don't listen? And so it kind of like focuses on this idea which is kind of twofold. So if you don't listen to someone, you can't be like led astray, but also it's the opposite. Like if you aren't fully listening to someone, which our modern idea, we use like emotional intelligence, like active listening, but I feel like Plato was kind of touching on this already. And I don't think he maybe realized the nuances of what he would say, because in our modern world, I think we see it more clearly than he did, because we talk more about, like I said, emotional intelligence and mental well-being, mental health, emotional well-being. But when he talks about this idea of listening, he's saying that to say that, you can't be manipulated and persuaded if you're just not paying attention to what someone's saying, but also you're not paying attention. But on the other hand, if you're actively listening, you're letting someone know that they matter, like their ideas and their opinions matter to you. And it's kind of only when that happens that somebody feels a little bit safer to share their thoughts. And that's when like true growth and change happens. So I really like how he starts by saying that, listening is so powerful. It's so important. It's like an act of goodness for another person, showing that you care about them enough to sit and listen. Like people are not problems to be solved. They're not there to be ignored. Which it's kind of ironic because in some moments of the book, he is ignoring people. He is kind of steamrolling over them, even though he's suggesting that we shouldn't do that. But he's doing it, for a reason. But still, that's one of the problems I do see in his work. But yeah, and he's also saying, again, like if you're fully listening, you're not treating people with disdain, you're not ignoring them, like you show that what they care about matters to you. And when they sense that, then they're able to be a little bit more honest, and then they can like fully understand, oh, is this an opinion? Like, did I think this was a fact just because my parents told me it was, but it was their opinion. It's just kind of passed on to me, which is difficult to do for sure. But yeah, so this idea of listening, and he talks about how it's foundational to philosophy. Like someone could say they're a philosopher, but if they don't actively listen, then they're missing a piece of that puzzle. So I really love how he starts with this idea. And, it's like listening to find the truth, listening to figure out how to best speak to someone to help them find the truth, which is just such a noble way of like living, isn't it? Like, whenever you're communicating, you listen, like so you can figure out what's best for them, and then you speak in a way that's best for them, which is definitely Plato's idea of what philosophy should be, that give and take, but with the idea for the greater good. And something else that I know I mentioned already, but how he kind of focuses on the relationship aspects of it, which I really love, like, just taking time to invest in someone is with that act of listening. And it also is very brave because you kind of are saying that maybe you don't have all the answers and maybe you can adjust in some way. So it's a very honest way, a very difficult way to live.
Yeah.
And then another passage, let's see. Yeah, so it talks a little bit more about listening. And then so still book 1, this is like line 329 down in the D section. He kind of alludes to justice as well, which this is my other big point that I like to mention with Plato, because you hear a lot of people will talk about, and we recently had a friend whose son passed away, and you ask, like, how is that fair? How is that just? But it's interesting how he kind of makes that distinction, because he says, justice is something that you actually can control. Whereas like fate, things that happen, somebody gets sick and they die, they get hit by a car, that's something that completely out of your control. But justice is something that humans, in his perspective, like we can control that, because one unjust act leads to another, and it's like a ripple effect. And then people end up suffering. They're like, well, why did this happen? It's because of poor decisions that were made. So there's like the human aspect of justice, but then you have just, like fate, which is different, like sickness, injury. But he says, a lot of people worry about old age, they worry about death. But he's like, for in every way, old age brings great peace and freedom. When the desires cease to strain and finally relax, then what Sophocles says comes to pass in every way. It is possible to be rid of very many mad masters, but of these things and of those that concern relatives, there is one just cause, not old age, Socrates, but the character of the human beings. If they are orderly and content with themselves, even old age is only moderately troublesome. If they are not, then both age, Socrates, and youth alike turn out to be hard. So this is where he's starting to talk about justice. Like he thinks, so the second point I just want to mention too, and it all like comes back to listening and, the way you treat people. But he says, justice is ordering yourself in a way that makes sense, like paying your debts. So thinking economically, but also like speaking kindly to others. So he's got like this list here where he says, pay off your debts. So financially, economically wise. But then he's like telling the truth. So understanding yourself, because you can't really like speak truth or seek after truth unless you are in touch with yourself. And then considering others, of course. So that is what he's saying. Like when you order yourself, you're looking at these three moments. And he also talks about how when you're full of justice, you accept yourself, which is something, especially in our society, is difficult to do, because you see everywhere people are just like, oh, well, get this surgery and act more like this person and be more smiley. And, there's just a whole lot of chatter in our ears about what we should look like and how we should act to be accepted. And Plato is just saying, well, actually, you'll never find happiness outside of yourself. It comes from inside, like ordering yourself in a way that makes sense to you and finding satisfaction within who you are, which is really powerful. And, a lot of people will say that today, too. If you talk to psychologist or a therapist, you're just like, I'm not happy. And they'll say the same thing that Plato is like suggesting here.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. But he also says, so if I flip over, he also says too that there are layers of justice. Like it's not so prescriptive. It almost reminds me of when you're just like, well, lies are bad, but little white lies every now and then are okay. Yeah. He's like, well, he tells this story about how I'll just read it. So sometimes it's not as prescriptive as we think, but he says, as to this very thing, justice, shall we so simply assert that it is the truth and giving back what a man has taken from another, or is it to do these very things, sometimes just and sometimes unjust? Take this case as an example of what I mean. Everyone would surely say that if a man takes weapons from a friend when the latter is of sound mind and the friend demands them back when he is mad, one shouldn't give back such things. And the man who gave them back would not be just. And moreover, one should not be willing to tell someone in this state the whole truth. Yeah. So, so he says also, it has layers. Like you, again, build that relationship. Like you listen and you pay attention to people. And if you see that their state of mind isn't what it was, or like telling them something, or, like performing some kind of act for them would actually not do them a service, then that's actually a form of justice. He says, so it's treating people, seeking the good for them just as much as you seek the good for yourself. So
it's interesting you bring that one up because I flagged that too, was, that's in the gun control argument. That's one of the things, the red flag laws, where if a person has mental illness, that they're not allowed to have a gun.
Yes.
Their family can restrict that, their gun. And I thought, well, that's interesting that, that's so many years ago and we're still debating the same kind of thing. Is that fair or just to withhold that. It makes common sense, but
Yeah.
and some people would say, well, it's not just because of their, we have such a extreme version of individual rights in our country. So,
Yes.
but it's just interesting to me that the same questions recur throughout history.
Yes.
in different, slightly different, particulars, but not really, not in essence of what they're about. Yeah.
That's right. That's why I like Plato too, because I feel like he comes to those same topics that we still wrestle with in our society today. And sometimes, like he's a bit circular in what he's saying, but it's still kind of the same, like kind of a pat on the back and be like, it'll be okay. And this is why.
Yeah.
So justice, he talks a lot about justice. He also, and this like goes back to education and liberal arts, like he says that the more you cultivate your mind and your character, which is what education does, the more you'll see justice clearly and you'll be able to order yourself and be content with yourself, which, as an educator, that's something I'm like, yeah, I agree with for sure.
Yes.
Because I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of times when you go to college, it's just getting that piece of paper. You're just kind of jumping through hoops and you lose sight of the purpose of education, which is to order yourself, like create a purpose for you so that you can see clearly and help others. Because it's not just about you, it's about everyone. And I like that aspect of Plato because he's like, well, it's not just about me. It's about the person I'm talking with and being in tune with their needs and actually listening to the things that are spoken, but also unspoken.
Yeah. Well, you just opened up a can of worms there, though, Jennifer. Yeah, that I could go on for a long time about what you just said, because as far as I'm concerned, and you can disagree, but I don't think you would too much, is that we have so commodified higher education and college and that experience to be it's do blank, 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 and you'll get a job kind of mentality when it was never intended for that at all. Right. And it's, hopefully someone would have better job skills because of the education, but so much now it's focused on just the job skills, and that does not lead to an emphasis on character. It's all very much ends justify the means kind of thing. And then of course this also gets me off into AI, which I don't want to talk about right now because I read a lot. I read a lot about AI and the problems with that, and it's like I'm sure that I'll be really honest. It was kind of the last straw of why I went ahead and retired. I was time for me to anyway, but I said I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
This is too much, and I've been really just researching it a lot and trying to understand the whole how it fits into education and everything else. But that's me talking. I'll get off of that. So how does an understanding of Plato's Republic, in your opinion, help us today politically? I think you may have already answered that. And if there's more things you want to cover in the book, that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so his discussion of justice is interesting. And something else, too, which, kind of helps us as well, is his look at how to divide humans. He says that we have like 3 parts, which is interesting. And 3 seems to be the magic number. Like no matter whatever religion, if you're watching a kid show, like it's 3. They mess up 3 times. And then they learn.
Yeah.
And even in writing, this is something that I think it's a cycle. Like I appreciate it because I learned it, but like the essay has 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, the end. When you're communicating, there are 3 parts. So it's just, I don't know. The 3 is the magical number.
Yeah.
But in book 4, he talks about how there are 3 parts, and I don't want to read a whole lot, but I'll just read a couple more passages.
Okay, that's fine.
So he's talking about dividing the self, and he says, do we act in each of these ways as a result of the same part of ourselves, or are there 3 parts? And with a different one, we act in each of the different ways. Do we learn with one, become spirited with another of the parts within us, and desire the pleasures of nourishment and generation, and all their kin with the third? Or do we act with the soul as a whole and each of them once we are started? And he just continues on. So that's kind of where he introduces this idea. So he says that the first part of the human is the reason part. And this is, the search for logic, it's reflection, it's silence, it's understanding the self, which can be difficult, especially in, you had mentioned it, Barbara, and I'm going to take it back to AI and social media.
Yeah.
But there's so much competing for our attention, especially today, that we don't allow ourselves time to sit in silence and reflect and check in with ourselves as often as we need to. And if we could do that more often, just as Plato said, we would be able to reason, I think, a little bit better than we do often because we're so rushed and we're so distracted. So he says that's the first part. And the second part is, our spirit. And that is like our energy. This is where our emotions lie. And he's saying that once everything lines up with reason, like your actions, your passions will be driven by logic, by your wisdom. And then the third one, of course, is the appetite, which I feel like this one is getting fed the most in our society because this is like entertainment, doing things that are fleeting, but you feel like you want to do them at the moment. It makes sense in the moment. So he says it's like the desire for food, money, entertainment, so the bodily pleasures, but it's shifting. These are temporary. He says they're not rational. This is like the enemy. So the hierarchy, it's reason, and then your spirit, like your emotion, your energy, and then at the bottom, it's those desires, which, is very reminiscent of, and of course it was before Freud, but Freud also has the theory. Is the ego, super ego. So you can see the connections. I mean, it's a little bit different, but also very similar.
Yeah. Yes. And so then he structures the republic or the government around that, where you have the philosopher kings, as we used to call them, and then the army, the warriors, who would be the spirit, I guess, and then the business people, the farmers, whatever, as the ones at the bottom, because they deal with the daily existence kind of stuff.
Yes.
That's kind of how he translates that to that. And it's, that's interesting. One issue I have with Plato, though, is that, is the dualism, where I think he's always denigrating the body. And he's always, the body is just like, whatever, it's got to be there. But which you get into with the cave. You were talking about your professor, and when I taught humanities, earlier years, I used to have this little thing I did to show how the cave at worked.
Oh yes.
I'd bring a student up, and I'd say they're tied up, and then they're facing this, and I'd dance around. I'd try to, and then I'd come up to him and I'd say, "So Plato says you have to use philosophy and turn around and up there, and I'd turn him around, and it was to try to make it dramatic, because it is such a dramatic and wonderful analogy or picture for what he's trying to say. The cave thing is just that was so interesting. So do you teach this book in your classes?
I do. So even if I don't specifically point out, I will reference Plato. I'll have them in my PowerPoints. I definitely love the allegory of the cave, which if you haven't read it, it's in book 7.
Right.
And just as Barbara said, there's this nice little imagery of prisoners chained in a cave, and their back is to the opening of the cave, so they don't see the sun. All they see are the shadows. And then there's fire, so they see like it flickers, and they don't know what is reality, because what they think is reality is actually not reality. And he compares this. I mean, it's so great. It's so rich. You could compare this in so many ways, but I think the overarching way to interpret this is with education, just like expanding the mind, freeing yourself. And so if you want to go back to AI, talking about how we're all kind of chained to entertainment and social media in some respects.
Yeah.
And freeing ourselves from that to, really spend some time with ourselves, figuring out what we value, what matters to us, like ordering ourselves in a way that makes sense, will lead to less anxiety, less depression. And Plato even alludes to that. We see that happening a lot in our society today, much more mental health concerns.
Right.
But we're also more open, I think, to mental health issues than perhaps other generations. So I mean, I could see both of that, but I also think, Plato is onto something here as well. So, not chasing after those temporary fleeting desires and appetites, which is kind of what's ruling the world now with
Right.
social media.
Well, I mean, if you're spending a lot of time on social media, you're only seeing what they want you to see. So you're not freeing your mind to see other things. And so there, and AI is the same way. One of the things we know about AI, if you use it very much, it is designed never to disagree with you, but it's designed to say it in a conciliatory way to try to know you. If you're using the engine over and over and you're training it, it knows who you are. And so it's not really conflicting with you or saying no. It's saying, well, yes, but you need to think of it this way. It's like, I don't want a machine doing that to me. It's so condescending. It's so condescending because it's just a language pattern, but it's, yeah. So I think the cave thing is that you have to be freed, even if you're self-imprisoned, you have to freed to get out and see a different part of the world instead of what's curated for you in the algorithm of the AI.
Yes, that's good. And something so, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say something that's so interesting too about the allegory of the cave is like after that person sees the sun and they come to that knowledge, they have to go back to the cave, which is hard, the whole thing is hard. It's hard to escape. It's hard to see the light and it's hard to go back where people are going to judge you and say, oh no, you're wrong. Like this is how it is. And, but he does make a point to say that the return is part of that cycle. Like you can't just learn it for yourself. You have to learn it in order to help others.
Yeah.
So if you're missing that piece of the puzzle, then you'll never truly find that sense of fulfillment because you're just doing it for you. Like it's good that you did it for you, but also the return is like, we use closing the loop. The return. There's got to be that.
I haven't just closing the loop in a while.
I know. I hesitated to use it because
that's okay. No, it is important. You do have to close the loop and everything. I mean, that's a great point. I often used to tell my students that there were certain books or works that they should not be able to graduate without knowing. I said that. I don't think they got my joke, but it wasn't a joke. It was, I really believed it. And some of the things I put on that list were things that I liked and that I, that I taught in certain classes, like John Milton's Areopagitica, De Tocqueville, Dr. King's Letter from Birmingham Jail, Hamlet, the Bible, of course. Do you have a list like that, and would Republic be on it?
It would, and that's a good list. I love the Coming to America by De Tocqueville. When I read that, it was very insightful for me. So I would definitely have him on my list. Definitely Plato. Of course, Aristotle. I ultimately do side a little bit more with Aristotle than Plato, but I so appreciate Plato because we wouldn't have Aristotle,
right?
We didn't have Plato, and we wouldn't have. So we stand on the shoulders of all the people that come before us. But I like Cicero. I like his writings. He's got something on duties. Augustine, his Confessions. I mean, that's just classic. And I don't think there's something in I think all the philosophers have like a piece of the puzzle, just like all of us. I don't think there's something you can fully be like, oh, this is 100%. But I feel like we all have like a piece, and when we put it together, we'll see the whole picture. But Boethius, Constellation of Philosophy, I remember reading that. I think I was a sophomore when I read that one. Thomas Aquinas, of course.
Oh, yes.
Really appreciate. I think most people read The Prince, Machiavelli, but that one is also really impactful. One work that I actually did like is Voltaire. He wrote Candide, and I enjoyed reading that one. Of course, Sir Thomas More's Utopia. That one's so good. Gulliver's Travels. Most people just watch the cartoon and they see the part with Lilliput and Lilliput. They don't see all the tales with the floating island and the horses.
That book is so evil. So evil in his satire.
Yes.
Yeah, the horse. But I love the horse planet or wherever he's going, the horse island.
Yeah, the widow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and even Dracula. Because you can even say that Dracula is in his own little cave. Like he represents desires. He represents the darkness of
Yeah.
I mean, there are like so many ways
Yeah.
you could compare him to Plato and Descartes, John Locke. Like I'm just kind of going through the list, but even Kant and Rousseau, Nietzsche, love him or hate him, he's got some good thought-provoking ideas in there. Camus, the same way. Even like Virginia Woolf, and like more modern Toni Morrison. I just love her.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a lot.
The problem is that sounds like a curriculum for an English major. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the other people getting to read those things. I'm going to read a quote I found in my research. The quote, in 2001, a survey of over 1,000 academics and students voted the Republic the greatest philosophical text ever written. Julian Baggini argued that although the work, quote, was wrong on almost every point, comma, the questions it raises and the methods it uses are essential to the Western tradition of philosophy. Without it, we might not have philosophy as we know it, end quote. In 2021, a survey showed that the Republic is the most studied book in the top universities in the United States. So you have picked a very good, relevant, important book to discuss with me today. I don't want to cut you off. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I just wanted to say it was great connecting it back to modern society. I mean, you mentioned AI, and I definitely see the comparisons. So, but yeah, no matter how old it is, it's always timely, I think.
Oh, yes. Well, that's the problem. The age thing has nothing to do with its relevance. That's what's so great about it, We think things that are more recent probably aren't that relevant because they're not going to stick around that long. They might be very fleeting. So, well, I want to thank Dr. Jennifer Randall, professor of English at Dalton State College, for meeting with me today. And she responded very quickly, and I was so happy and talking to me today on this very essential text. And Dr. Randall, I wish you the best as the semester flows on. You'll get a break here in about a month for spring break. That's always nice. And I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yes, and thank you, Barbara. I appreciate the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
Good. Thank you.